Hello everyone, I'm Justin, and for my first video, I'll be reviewing Humanity Has Declined, the good, the bad, and its ending. First of all, I want to give a disclaimer. This is just my personal opinion, and I'll be giving some minor spoilers, so take that in mind. With that said, let's play the intro. But before we start reviewing the show, let's begin with a brief introduction. Humanity Has Declined focuses on a girl only known as Watashi, or Mediator. And as her name implies, she serves as the bridge between the declining human population and fairies, magical creatures with a variety of powers and a reproduction rate of rabbits. Seriously, leave them alone together, and the next moment there are already 10 times the number. These beings are the key point of the show, and their many antics are what makes this anime so interesting to watch, as you never know what random things they are up to, from creating a food production plant to literal time paradoxes, or should I say, paradoxes? Now that we have a better understanding of the anime, let's move on to the next segment. One of the things that makes this anime good is the interaction between the main characters. Watashi, with her grim take on reality, as she has seen firsthand the decline of humanity, always had a witty comebacks and an elaborated plans to turn things in her favor. Even though most of the time they don't work, which makes for a great dark humor. On the other side, other characters such as Grandfather, Y, and Assistant help with more light-hearted takes on life and a more healthy humor. I want to especially shout out to whoever is the voice actress for Y. I laughed every time she was talking, and her episodes were one of the best. For world building, I have to say that the author gave the audience a great take on a common trope that is the imminent end of the world. I think it's comparable to the situation in Interstellar, in which everyone has to work as a farmer due to the lack of crops production. This is perfectly portrayed in the first episode, where Mediator is commanded to kill the chickens as they have stopped giving eggs. On another note, the music in this show is amazing. Both the intro and its ending showcase what this show is all about. First, the intro gets you hyped for a funny episode while doing that silly dance, while the ending gives you a brief glimpse of reality and how dark the show can get. And lastly, I want to praise the comedy. Even though some episodes may be lacking on this side, overall, the anime gives some really top-notch laughs, such as the bread scene or the yaoi episode. And personally, I never got tired of seeing what activity the fairies were preparing for our protagonist. So, I really recommend watching this anime. Now, while Humanity Has Declined has some good points, it is also important to mention that it lacks in some other sides. First, let's talk about this Haruhi Suzumiya episode order. I want to make a clear point that I haven't read the light novels, so I don't know if this is the real order, but for my understanding, the first episode is supposed to be one of the last. Then we move in between order and so on. And while I understand that the first episode does give a great impression and gives a better understanding on what this show is all about, for the first 5 minutes I was wondering if I skipped an episode, which is not ideal. And this goes even further in some other episodes that were scattered across the season, just so that they could hook the viewer in the first episode and then give some lackluster episodes here and there, which I don't think is completely wrong. But instead of doing that, they could have instead made the boring episodes shorter and proceed in a better plot story for the show. Which comes to my last point, the plot. What can I say about the plot, other than it's basically non-existent? There is no way to raise humanity back, no solution in sight or a clear objective to this show, other than a post-apocalyptic slice of life. Which, all by itself, is not a bad show, but it left this empty space at the end of the season in which you feel like nothing has been achieved, and knowing how the story ends, I wish they could have developed a bit more into it. Now, before I start my last point of this video, I need to give a last warning. I am the type of person who watches an anime and goes to read the manga or the light novel if possible. But apparently, Humanity Has Declined has a really weird way of writing, using puns and difficult sentences that make it impossible for translator to translate, and there is nowhere to read it in English. So I did what anybody in my position would do. I went to Reddit for answers, and after reading the ending, it just felt like a good way to go for me. So in the anime, the ending is a two-part episode delving into the roots of the protagonist and how she became so pessimistic on her views of humanity, mainly in her school years learning to be a mediator, which by itself is not a bad episode, but it didn't feel like a closure to me, so I decided to look for a real ending, and it came really unexpected. As I mentioned before, the protagonist had an assistant that for some reason never talked, only using signs to communicate, which was a really funny way to make it and it gave a lot of laughs for me. And after knowing about the ending, it all makes sense now. From what I read online, the last book focuses on a travel to the moon, and during some point they remember that in reality they are all fairies that decided to copy humanity since they miss them. Well, all of them except for Assistant, or Joshua, as we finally get to know in the after story, who is the last human known. So the show ends with them deciding to take care of the Assistant, and the light novel ends with this grim note: humanity has indeed declined to 1. Which is not a perfect ending, but it gave me the closure that I needed for a show that got me so hooked, and for I know there would never be a second season. But before I end, I want to say that this ending may not be 100% accurate, since I read it on Reddit and instead of a light novel translation, so take that with a grain of salt. So what do you guys think about the show? Please let me know in the comments, and if you have any recommendation for my next video, please let me know. Until then, see you guys next time.